All right. Well, again, I don't want to keep people waiting. Kelsey, that was a good suggestion to start with the item 5, I believe you said.
Yeah, so what we would do is call the roll quick to establish that we do not have a quorum. Then we could proceed to the informational item. And then if we get quorum, then we can retake the roll. So would you like me to go ahead and call that now?
Okay.
Councilmember Voss? Lee? Carter? Vernon?
Present.
Boynes?
Present.
Ariano? Madam Chairwoman?
Present.
There are 3 members present. We do not have a quorum. Would you like me to read an item 5?
Please do.
Item 5, a discussion regarding submission to the Milwaukee County Board of Supervisors in the May meeting cycle and advisory council attendance at the next meeting of the Committee on Parks and Culture. This item is for information only.
Chair, Supervisors, is this regarding presence at the next, if I heard correctly, the Parks Committee meeting, right? Is it a discussion around ability to, yeah. So I can start if that's okay. Just Jim Tarantino and I are putting together a report going over the funding strategy recommendation that the board approved. Hopefully we'll be able to integrate the social cohesion metrics so that the board can look at the entire kind of funding strategy recommendation from this board. Ideally, CAMPAC members are there as well, really sharing the voice and your desire to see this type of funding strategy moving forward. And so I think it's just a call out to see if anybody would be willing or able to join us. Jim, I would guess this would be May 12th if things stay according to schedule. Is that fair?
We don't know. I think, honestly, Kelsey, probably closer to the scheduling of committees, but I had heard Parks Committee would be delayed based on availability of committee members, but I really don't know the date.
Just to chime in here, so as some context, the County Board of Supervisors recently were on the April ballot and are being sworn in at the April 20th organizational meeting. At that meeting, there will be an election of a chairperson, and subsequent to that, the chairperson will make standing committee leadership announcements. And at that time, the county clerk's office will be in contact with whoever is appointed chairperson of the Committee on Parks and Culture to get that next meeting scheduled. I know that makes things a little challenging for planning purposes, but so we really won't know until a series of things occurs, and then as soon as we know who that chairperson is, I will work to get the May date scheduled as soon as possible so that people have as much advance notice to get that on their calendars and hopefully join us.
So I guess my ask is, right, once the date is confirmed, to have CAMPAC members present to really, this is your board, you speak to your desire for the funding strategy. You know, ideally, it is our role just to help kind of liaison, but this is really your voice. And also want to stress how important it is that we get the full picture. And so if social cohesion is still on the desire of this board, we do want to integrate that into our May board report in order to keep track with the funding cycle for this year.
I would just add too that once that meeting date is scheduled, if this is referred to the Committee on Parks and Culture and subsequently scheduled by the chairperson, I will be providing Microsoft Teams invitations to the entire advisory council if they are able to attend virtually, but you are also welcome to attend in the county courthouse in the designated meeting room, if that is how you would like an opportunity to address the supervisors that way. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you both. I see LaShawn, Member Vernon's hand up. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I am in support, just to say for the record, the continuation of prioritizing social cohesion as a priority for how the funds, the spirit of the funds is what I will say for this, for the nature of it. And will be making myself available to the best of my ability to join those meetings. Again, calendar invites are my friend. So if I know that you have secured a time and you know it's on the calendar, more than happy to receive a calendar invite and make my best effort to be present. Thank you.
Thank you. And it looks like we have a fourth council member present. Maybe we'll get a fifth. I guess my question, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Madam Chair.
Oh, I was just going to ask now that, I mean, we still don't have a quorum, and I realize that there's still time, but my concern is if we're not able to take action on any of the items on our agenda, because there are, in my opinion, several important items on the agenda. And the timing, I know that we don't know when the next Parks Committee meeting is, but we do know, if I understand correctly, that it will be in May, which leaves us very little time to reschedule. And I guess I just want to check it. My assumption is that we would possibly need to reschedule in order to be prepared for said meeting or to support Ms. Benton and Mr. Tarantino in preparing the presentation for that committee meeting. What can we do next?
Chair, if you like, I could go over the social cohesion draft as an informational item so that members that are present can get a sense of where I'm going and offer feedback, at least for now, and hopefully make a smoother transition to taking action when there is a quorum.
I'd appreciate that, Ms. Benton. Yes, thank you.
Would you like me to read in item 1 at this time?
Yes, please.
Item 1, discussion regarding incorporation of social cohesion into the application scoring rubric. This has been noticed as an action item, but no action will be taken by this body until a quorum is reestablished.
So as we already discussed earlier, this body does desire to see social cohesion weaved into the existing CAMPAC application. And so what me and my team have done is thought about how can we incorporate social cohesion so that it is primarily objective. And we're trying to keep this form as simple as possible. Although I do want to add there is room for some subjectivity just given the nature of this. So I'll just go over how we're looking at it. So the full application is on a form, and then the social cohesion index, which is really 3 different areas we'd be looking at trying to measure, would be woven into the form, and then applicants could respond. And within each of these different indices, they would receive a score based on a number. And the last one is the one that has a little bit subjectivity. But so how we thought about it is knowing that there's a wide range of size and capabilities, what are things that meet social cohesion that organizations would likely have data on hand for? And so the first is that geographic reach. So are we bringing people together? Either are people coming in to the organization, or is the organization itself going through different parts of the county, roadshows, things like that? And so within Milwaukee County, what percentage of program attendees reside with outside of the organizational zip code. So if we're in 53203 as an organization, how many program attendees reside outside 53203, for example? And then just based on the percentage you give, you get an automatic score. So if everybody only comes from 53203, you'd need to click this first one and you'd automatically be populated with a score of 10 and so on. I just want to confirm that this makes sense to the group before I go on to the next one. I saw a nodding of head. Okay. Then the second one is around the collaboration with other community partnerships. Community partnerships could be other arts organizations, it could be schools, neighborhood groups, just again, like how are they trying to integrate collaboration within their programming around that social cohesion. So it's a solid number of, how many community partners you have. You click on this, and depending on how many you have in terms of partnerships, again, you are automatically allocated a score. So 1 to 2 would receive 10, and then 6 or more, 30 points. Any questions on this one? And then this is the one that I think maybe warrants a little bit more integration into the form. But so we thought about, right, it's really about inclusivity at its core. How are we bringing communities together? And so this can be around free public events. We're trying to be accessible to a wide range of incomes, culturally appropriate programming, getting into festivals, but then also accessibility of programming to different types of people, such as those that may require auxiliary aids, for example. How is the marketing being done to promote programming to a wider audience, programming in different languages as an example. So this is a really wide category. So same thing here, you could just enter the number you have, but just given that I felt like this is a harder one to be more objective on, my recommendation is that we offer a space for just a little bit of a narrative around that to help better justify the extent that they are being inclusive in their programming. But with this integration of a narrative, it does warrant, I think, a larger discussion of this CAMPAC group on how to then make the decisions given the, I guess, the layer of subjectivity that I feel like is in this index. Happy to take any feedback.
I think I just have a question about multicultural and potentially adding a / culturally specific. It could still function as the same category, I think, but I'm open to other people's thoughts on that. By putting culturally specific, it will lead to the narrative of location and place in a very intentional way. That may not necessarily be racially specific or ethnicity specific. So I just wanted to add that to open up the doors for some organizations to see themselves that way.
Thank you.
So I have a question, and maybe this is a bit premature, but when I think about how requests for CAMPAC funding used to be, it was a detailed application, and then in more recent years, I believe I have to admit that I've not seen what organizations have to fill out in order to be considered for funding, and my assumption, I suppose this is an assumption, is that in recent years, because it's been the same amount and these groups are established, that there wasn't much to the application process. And I wonder, I personally think that it's going to help that groups will be able to respond to these items in ways that are more descriptive. And I wonder if, and again, I don't know if I'm jumping the gun here, but for this third item, if it would be helpful, and I don't know how this would be reviewed, to be able to have a descriptive paragraph so that it can be, I guess my concern personally would be that it would be the task of the organizations to let us know how intentional they are being with this item. Does the question make sense?
So if I understand correctly, Chair, yeah, I agree. Like the way we thought about it is the onus of the submitters would be to put to prove right to us here that they are being intentional. But it does add an additional onus for this board, because then you have to weigh those answers and the rankings to make the decision. So to the earlier question on, right, what does the form look like? Bear with me. I can show you. It's basically, it is a very, I guess, drilled down application. I don't have it in the form, but you can see here generally, here's the criteria in order to be eligible. This is just regarding the funding strategy. But then, like, you simply just have to enter in, basic information that you would have about your nonprofit, and then some of the forms you would be expected to have on hand. And then and this is it, right? So with filling in this information, it is my understanding, but Director Tarantino can confirm, but it's my understanding that if you met all of the criteria, then you were deemed, right, eligible. And then this board then voted on whether or not to fund at the existing funding strategy at this time. So what we would be doing here is then adding a whole nother section around social cohesion. Again, like, they'd be getting a score, which is new. They've never received a score. It was either like you're in or you're out. But now we'd be weighing them and trying to fit them within these tiers moving forward.
Thank you for showing us this. It is helpful. It helps my mind be able to visualize better. And I'm still thinking about what Member Vernon was saying, because I think it really does help to think about it in that sense of being culturally specific, because my mind went to, sometimes there used to be a community festival that featured world music. Okay, that features a lot of different cultures, and that is the purpose of the festival. An arts organization may have programming in a school that is bilingual, and that would be another type of category. I think there's a lot of ways that people are going to be able to qualify, but again, the burden would be then on them to be a bit more specific. So now that I heard myself saying something about a descriptive paragraph, that's a lot to go through. And maybe it makes more sense to, in the form, give examples, describe categories such as, is there specific school programming? Is it neighborhood programming? Is it in different languages? Is it culturally specific? I think that it might be helpful in terms of weeding things out, or helping us to be able to go through these things, anticipating those sorts of things. I hope that makes sense. Member Vernon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to chime in from the perspective of both providing the feedback over some of these grants. I'm also on the Wisconsin Arts Board and the Brownsville Advisory Committee. We established a rubric as well, so that we're able to have things like closed sessions impacting anybody questioning our decision making as a body that's appointed. And so the rubric approach is really helpful. Having really clear metrics is helpful. And I think most applicants wish they had a little bit more room to explain themselves. And so if there's a category for a summary of what they do, we can assign a point limit to that as well. I think that would probably be able to leverage the spirit of why they're doing the work or what they bring to the table that is unique to place in Milwaukee. That could be a category where they can describe their story. And a lot of grants don't leave a lot of room for that anyway. Everybody's accustomed to having to cut down their story in order to get into an application in the first place. So I think those will be easy ways to provide the social impact storytelling side of this. So it doesn't just become, numbers only for the public who may not necessarily feel like that's the way they want to see this done. But for our needs, we do need to start measuring. We need to start evaluating in order to make informed decisions. So I appreciate getting the data back from the types of questions that were selected. Thank you.
Member Byrne, perhaps what we could do is rather than like a direct score for like the summary of what the organization does that is unique in Milwaukee, is kind of make that an introductory statement and then get into the metrics. It might make it easier then to finalize the scoring into the different tiers while still remaining. I think my goal is to remain as objective as possible to make it easier for this board, but I like the suggestion of incorporating a little bit more narrative so we have a better understanding of the organizations. I'm just having a hard time wrapping my mind around how we would score that, other than maybe it helps us weigh our final decision.
I agree. It makes sense to make it the statement. I'm sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it makes sense to use the statement for that space, but be explicit so they know, tell your story. And maybe give them a little bit of slack on the number of characters that they can use, but not too much. Just to be able to, you can use those in the introduction of the applications for marketing purposes, for like everything that you're going to need to do for those applicants to shine anyway. So I think that's a great way to look at that.
Yeah, I agree. I would like to just say that I think that would be really helpful for organizations to have a bit of space to explain, because numbers don't tell the whole story. And I think that if that section, I think it's helpful, in terms of scoring and being objective, to say, okay, you get points if you have two different aspects, or, it's based on how many of these aspects you have in your programming or how you meet the criteria, and then give us some descriptive information about what that is, because it's not a one size fits all kind of category when we're talking about how organizations are using the arts to appeal to diverse audiences, have more diverse programming. It's just not that simple. And so I think that if we're addressing it in a way that is numeric and statistical, but also giving the opportunity for narrative, it'll be a bit more clear. But yes, there would have to be a word count so that we're not overwhelmed by having to go through. So giving examples, being clear about the criteria, and then giving organizations the opportunity to describe, because sometimes it might be the layers of the performance, the themes of a performance, and how it is being, what the intentional audience is. And I just imagine that it's going to be complicated to parse out. Do others have thoughts about that? Member Vernon, I'm not sure if your hand's up from before or if it's up again.
Sorry, it's not up again. I just never took it down. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, did we want to move on to another informational item? I don't think we're going to get a quorum, but maybe I'll be proven wrong. I'd be happy to be proven wrong.
Would you like me to read in item 2?
Yes, please.
Item 2, discussion regarding the advisory council's involvement in the application review process. This is an action item, but without quorum, the body will only consider it for information.
So this is in regards to, with social cohesion now playing a role in our forum, how we want to handle your involvement in determining the awards and the tiers now that we will have 3 tiers, assuming the board approves it moving forward. So I guess from my point of view, there could be 2 ways, maybe more, that we could facilitate this process. So the first is that myself and or members of my team, we take in the applications and we do an initial review and put together our kind of recommended awards based on the social cohesion tier, and then this body, votes on yay or nay or making what other changes. That's option 1. Option 2 is that we provide the raw kind of application data to you, and you all as a committee make the determination. Again, this is more work for all of you, but it is my preference, given that you all have the expertise in the space beyond me and would be able to understand more of the subtleties, but it would require a longer in-depth meeting to make that determination.
Members have thoughts about that? I mean, personally, I think it would be a more meaningful experience to be able to look at the application so that we know what we're voting on when it comes that time. I've heard various members throughout the years saying that we want to be able to see more of what goes into the process. I personally would be willing to show up and be part of the process, but I just wonder how willing other members of the committee are, if that is something that we would do as a group, as one of our meetings, that would be a precursor to the final vote. I think that we would probably need a sense of timing and what would be asked. But I personally would be willing to be involved. How do other people feel about that? Just as a general, since we're not taking action on this today, if that is something that feels reasonable to ask of this body. Go ahead, Member Vernon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to check in and make sure I know what the process was in previous cycles. Were there ever in the past also committees that you established outside of the board for CAMPAC to review those applications, or has it always been a responsibility of staff to kind of bring us the outcome? Just to be clear about what has worked and what hasn't worked within your already existing processes.
I'm only aware of the CAMPAC board. I don't know if I'm brand new to this, so I can't speak to it, but others might have a better awareness.
I don't remember ever. Go ahead.
No, I think it's always been, it's taken different shapes, but it's always been the staff led process of reviewing applications and scoring them and then bringing the recommendation for an up or down vote. I shouldn't say always, but at least the past 20 years. I have some historical information I could look back before that, but yeah, I think if what you're talking about doing would be shift And one thing to think about is just open meetings and judging, grant applications in an open meeting environment. What would that look like?
That's a good point. I'm remembering, so as long as I've been part of this committee, which has been 6 or 7 years now, I don't remember ever being part of the process, but before then, when Rick Clark was the administrator, there was just the one staff person, and I remember him as delivering the checks and being part of that. I don't remember, and I remember the application process being more involved. I guess my question would be, was that all up to the one staff person at the time, or was there more to it? Because I'm not remembering. And then I think Member Carter had his hand up.
Yeah, Mr. Clark did manage the whole process, start to finish. And the old system, the pre-2020 scoring system, was also formula based. It was just a formula based on the size of the budget. There was another funding category that had to deal with community cultural events. It was the CCE category. But again, it was formula based. So if, your budget was X, your grant award was Y. And he would run the formula through a spreadsheet, and there was no subjectivity to it. It was just, and then presented to this group as, I ran the numbers, here's the results. Which is kind of what it's been for the last couple of years under this, different framework, but same process that for me or for Jeremy Lucas, there's no subjectivity to it. Just we got the applicants, here we verified their nonprofit status, we got an audit, we did a performance, and here's the result. So it wasn't, I don't think there's any room for subjectivity for staff to run those application processes.
Thanks for that, Mr. Tarantino. Member Carter, did you still have a comment?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I think Mr. Tarantino answered a lot of my questions. Something that, even like timing wise, I am thinking about the old process seemed like it was a little more streamlined due to it being formula based. Is it too much to create this subjective, does that delay us from getting things to where we can approve it to, I don't know, I didn't hear that that adding a piece to it will still allow us to reach our deadlines in time. So that's just, maybe somebody said it and I didn't hear it, but other than what Mr. Tarantino said, that's the only thing that stands out. Because it seems like we're adding more. So if we're adding more steps, will we still be able to do things by the time everything is due?
Ms. Benton?
So for us to stay on schedule with what years prior have been, which is a goal of requesting approval of the funding allocation in our September cycle, that would mean that this CAMPAC board needs to make the final recommendations no later than the last week of July into the first week of August for us to be able to submit for the September cycle. So in my opinion, this is adding a substantial level of complication and time to the process because we are adding subjectivity. And so this board would have to put more time and effort towards making these recommendations, which means more meeting time, however it works out, more meeting time in July in order to make this happen. So it is possible. I am a bit concerned about the fuzzy gray area we are entering into with the social cohesion and how that will be handled.
Thank you, Ms. Benton.
Member Vernon?
I think we have a dilemma on our hands of not having a quorum because that means that this meeting would not produce approval for a document for you, Ms. Benson, as well, correct?
That's correct.
So regardless of this discussion, as robust as it may be, we could vote right now if we didn't have, if we didn't lack a quorum. And I think that would mean also, I'm just processing deadlines in reverse. That would mean also we would have to schedule another meeting to successfully approve what she's got in front of us. Am I correct? Okay.
Yes. Sorry, I'm going to jump in if that's okay. We don't have quorum, so I'm going to be more informal. I mean, you all did approve this funding strategy that offers more funding for the cornerstone organizations. So that was approved. That could still go in front of the board for the May cycle, I think. But if I understand correctly, though, the board still, they can approve that. But if you then want to still add social cohesion or like change the form, I do think that would need board approval. Kelsey, is that fair?
So my understanding from the original resolution that kind of got this all going was that there's a finalized, completed funding strategy formula submitted in June. So if you were to make any additional changes, like for instance, if you were to submit adoption of this in May, and then say you want to go back and add social cohesion, I think you would once again have to bring that additional change to the county board. It's my, that's my understanding, that they wanted the finalized one in June.
And for us to stay on schedule, we'd want the application open, but no later than the end of June. If we stay at the same pace we have been.
Member Carter? Oh, go ahead, Kelsey. Kelsey and then Member Carter.
I was just going to chime in. We've typically been trying to get the funding out from working with Mr. Lucas, Mr. Tarantino in the September cycle. I will say your funding allocations aren't prescribed anywhere. So what time of year you do that, is really up to the body. If September doesn't work for any reason, it's not outlined anywhere. My only understanding of the restriction is basically the funding year, and of course, organizations that are, of course, relying on receiving the funds at a certain time of year. But my understanding is there's no prescribed time period this has to go out.
I think there's a world, this is just me thinking, I think you can present something for action in May based around what you already have, and then figure out how you communicate back. We're boxed in by the county board schedule. Meet in May. The report for May is due next Wednesday. There just isn't enough time to keep going back and forth. And so just one approach would be to just get approval based on what you currently have and have an honest discussion about what's left to be decided upon.
I'm not sure if hands are up, so feel free to chime in. And I agree we can be more informal since we don't have a quorum. I do want to say that I share Member Vernon's concern, given the fact that, we are having a lot more meetings than, we've already had more meetings than we've had in all my years on this council, which I think is great that we are, I feel like I wanted to honor this work by being able to move forward, but I also want to be realistic about that. And the people who are here have been showing up. So I'm preaching to the choir, and I don't mean any disrespect to the people who are not able to be here right now. And yet at the same time, I want to make sure that we are making the most of our time and our timeline. so that we can all feel good about what we have been crafting together and the priorities that we have as a group. So I hear what you're saying, Mr. Tarantino, that we really don't have time, and we do have something to present at this May meeting. So if I understood correctly, then maybe it would make more sense to go with what we've got and try to schedule a meeting after, like send something out that encourages members of the council to go to that Parks meeting in May when it is set. And then as soon as we can, I am concerned with the summer coming up, people are going to be even busier. But yeah, how we're going to get a quorum for the next meeting is a big concern of mine.
Can we make if the issue is a quorum and time, one, can we host a meeting with solely this as the agenda item? Like, because I know even emails, even emails may lead to a quorum. And so are there other apparatuses where we can make a quick vote to kind of push things along? And then two, well, I forgot what I was about to say, so I'll just stick with that.
Just from an open meetings perspective, I mean, you all are welcome to talk to each other one-on-one, even in smaller subgroups. We had that discussion about the subcommittees. Just when we get a quorum of you that, there's this open meeting thing, I guess is a suggestion, right? That, if the council wanted to proceed with what they already adopted in May, your body is still free to make whatever decisions or recommendations you want for future funding cycles. If you have additional thoughts about the addition of the social cohesion, if there's not time for this, if the body wants to keep considering that for future funding years, it can do it without trying to meet this time crunch. So it's up to you, I guess.
Also, Kelsey, thank you for mentioning subgroups, because that was my next question. Does it have to be an official action to create maybe a subgroup that is charged with leaning into the July subjective conversations if we want that to be a step?
If you want to, it would have to constitute less than 5 of you. I'll say that you are entirely self-governed, so if that's the way that you want to go, you absolutely can. So long as there's not a majority of you, and you want to keep talking about this. But in terms of May, we are pushing up against the deadline.
Man.
Team members that are working for the county, I'm curious as to, and I brought up questions about the history of how this is done just because I didn't know, not because I felt like something needed to be replaced, but because you all have been stewards of this process. I'm curious as to what your preferences are as those that end up carrying the most responsibility for project managing this forward. And that helps to inform, I like to make a motion and move the action. You know how I am. So I want to inform that by what you'd prefer as those responsible for the duties for the work.
So what I would say is you all have this new kind of funding strategy. I'm not clear. I haven't spent time thinking about how we make that new funding strategy like wholly objective in and of itself. And I'm just trying to pull it up here because we have the different tiers. And so my preference is that we keep this as cut and dry as possible, because I am concerned again about this fuzzy gray space that I feel uncomfortable being in, and two, about the timing for organizations getting the money. But I still don't know then, like, if we took out social cohesion and we just focused on this funding strategy, how are the decisions going to be made within those tiers? Like, I don't have that cut and dry. And so from my perspective, work would still need to be done to figure that out. Because we were going to use social cohesion to do those tiers, is how I understood it.
I just, based on the direction the conversation's going, I'm wondering if we want to read in items 3 and 4, because that feels relevant, the funding application windows, and then the cornerstone organizations. Would you like me to go ahead and read those in?
Please do.
Item 3, discussion regarding calendaring of future application windows and establishing regularity in final allocation meetings. This is an action item, but without quorum, no action will be taken. Item 4, discussion regarding the newly adopted funding strategy as it pertains specifically to cornerstone organizations and distribution of unallocated balances. Once again, this is an action item, but without quorum, no action will be taken. And I'm sorry, I cut Director Benton off there, but she was, you were talking about basically trying to figure out what to do with this new funding strategy. That was still some lack of clarity, because the Cornerstone Organizations was part of the funding strategy you adopted at your last meeting.
If it's all right, Chair, I'll share my screen and I'll go over the funding strategy again. So this is what y'all voted on it the last time. So we've got this 5 awards for Cornerstone, and then additional awards for these. So if I understand correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, these tier 1, 2, and 3 would not be eligible for Cornerstone organizations. That was one of my questions for clarification. And 2, then how for the remaining organizations that would receive one of these tier grants, how do we then make this a determination without knowing what we're using to impact it, which was going to be social cohesion?
So I feel like, and I could be wrong, by articulating being tied to an impact measure, does that bind us in having to vote on it being what you've put forward? Can we not trust that the research you've done has unearthed that these questions get at some metrics in an impact measure that is social cohesion without it being said in what we voted on?
Is that question for me?
I think for all, I think because we don't have a quorum, I just want to be clear on where we need to separate motions or actions. If we've already voted on this, that is a social cohesion metrics is a part of impact measurement. Like it's just a category within it. And so what I'm curious about is if we've said we're going to use impact, that's an impact metric. This is just what you all have chosen to draft the questionnaire. And I'm talking through this because I want to make sure I'm understanding where we need to make a decision and where we trust the expertise of staff to take a tool to make some decisions out of it and then put forward recommendations. So I'm questioning if we even need to vote on choosing social cohesion explicitly is what I'm curious about.
So I'm looking at your minutes from last meeting, and you specifically adopted social cohesion as an addition to the scoring rubric as a metric to measure organizational impact. So that you've already done.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just always trying to see which things require an additional action on our part to make sure that there's no barriers to approving a document that would go forward to applicants. Because I think that's what's important in our discussion, that what we have approved to go forward is something that doesn't prevent the time period that they get to submit, just as much as the deadline of when completion occurs. Because I don't know your cycles, because I'm not on the team on the staff side. That's just now in the back of my brain as the behind the closed doors deadlines that we have to think about around what we need to vote on and what we untie your hands on.
So from my perspective, like, giving me as much cut and dry stuff is really the goal. I don't feel like this is enough for me to move forward with an application, because this would leave the weight of trying to make this decisions on me and my team. And it's just so subjective from my point of view. As an administrator for this program, I'm not comfortable in that space.
What is the timeline? I'm trying to get back into timeline specific to when you would be reviewing, for us to be thinking about potentially being a partner in your review process. Just so your comfort is there. That's something we could also maybe block for. Like, what is the time of the year we need to be prepared to support that?
So how it worked out in my head is that ideally in the May cycle, the Board of Supervisors would vote on adopting this with the social cohesion information, so that they had a full understanding of what the criteria would be. Then we would open up the application by the end of June. I believe it has historically been open for about a month. And so we would open it up for essentially the month of July, maybe a little bit longer, given that this is new, because we'd want to spend plenty of time advertising it. But anyway, it would be open around the month of July. They would fill in the forms, and then sometime mid-July through the first week in August is when this board would need to make the final decisions on the funding allocation, so that the board could approve in the September cycle. October, November is when the board votes on the budget for the following year. And so maybe I'm wrong, but I think if we missed September, the next time they would vote on this would be December as a board. And so we would be delaying by 3 months if we don't meet this September cycle.
Okay.
So I think there's a couple of, we cannot, from my understanding, we cannot keep the status quo that we have right now. The board is not comfortable with the equal distribution model that happened this last year that we've been ramping up to. So I don't think it's an option for us to, I don't know, maybe, I guess it is an option that we could try to extend this equal distribution for another year as we work this out. I don't know how successful that would be. Another option is to try to find a way to make this new funding scenario a little bit more cut and dry in preparation for a May or June, maybe we extend it to June. That makes me nervous, but we could try to do that. Or 3, we really try to hone in on the social cohesion and come up with a strategy for it. But, in all scenarios, we're going to need quorum to make those decisions.
That's the issue. Yeah. It becomes a slippery slope when we start thinking of ways to go around our quorum issue, when what we should be doing is engaging with committee members to get them to an understanding of urgency. And I'm happy to, I'm often being the urgency, so happy to let someone else take a turn. But I think the urgency of presence is a conversation that we need to have across the committee of those who, maybe they need to step down and make room for someone that has more capacity. And again, those are those gentle conversations amongst us that we might need to have. But first time, I'm satisfied with what you've put in front of us and would be willing personally to support the evaluation process, given that you've given me a timeline of just being available for that. And I feel comfortable in this space because the Arts Board has a whole nother science to the way that they do this, which they've already whipped me into shape pretty good. So I can be of support in ways of evaluation as necessary as you build your tool. If that's something that we need to do. If we end up, and I just want to call out our challenge, if we end up keeping things the way they were and continue with the status quo, we will then have to deal with the backlash of community members who were not happy with the status quo. And my inbox took a beating. I don't know about the rest of you committee members, but it does. We have an engaged community right now in the arts and culture sector, and good for us. But also, we would have to spend the energy without our consent anyway. It's kind of where I am with it. So I know we can't make any motions, but I've already said I want to support what you all have put forward because I'm a curiosity lead first. Let's put a survey out here, or not a survey, an application out here with some questions on it. It's not a lot of questions. You haven't gone into, I've seen way worse for way less money. Let me be clear. But I think putting it out there and then us as a committee, those that are present today and those that can, that are not today, be intentional about wrapping around the supports because we do work in the arts and culture sector. We have a better lens to support you, but also we measure as well. I think several of us on this team are part of impact measurement as well. I think that's the best that we can do right now, given the environment, because we are, as a committee, stuck between a rock and a hard place. Let's just be real. So I'm recommitting my support to the process. If I'm given a heads up, I can block things out. I've got more availability than I have had before. So if we can be intentional about, again, send me a calendar invite and an email. Hey, I need you to come to this. I will do my best to be supportive in that way once we do launch, when we decide to launch. And we're going to need that kind of hands-on support even if we go with our status quo approach, regardless. So, I just accepted a reappointment, and that's what that means. So I'm here to help with the process. Don't want to delay anything because I understand committees' delays have been the problem for the last year. The bounce back has got us spinning at this point. So I'm just here to continue to support that moving forward energy that you need. Because I don't have any other answers other than that. I'll be present for the application reviewing process if you need support so that you feel confident about your decisions. And I'm willing to publicly back them once we make them. We have to do something. That's what we're here for. So I'll be quiet now because we're completely out of protocol. We're just having the conversation at this point, which I appreciate, to be intentional about what's next.
I just want to chime in for a moment. I really appreciate your comments, Member Vernon. I too would like to make myself available for the evaluation process. I would be concerned about having another year of just going with the old model. I mean, I understand. At the same time, I do think that there would be a backlash, judging by some of the emails members of this body have received. And yeah, although I'm also aware that going about it in this way, there are still going to be people who want it a different way. I mean, we're not going to be able to please everyone, but we have put a lot of work in having this be a different model. I have to confess, I'm still, I just want to ask if I understand this correctly. We got a vote today anyhow. We're in this time crunch. We have already voted on a model that mentions social cohesion. am I correct in understanding that if we just go ahead and have you guys present that, are we still able to meet after the that May meeting that has no date yet and work on the application itself, or does that have to be approved by the supervisors as well? The specifics, I mean.
Kelsey, you want to take that?
Yeah, I guess it just depends on what extent the adoption of the specifics changes the formula, right? Like, you know, if your adoption of the specifics is changing the formula, like they want a finalized formula at the June meeting. So I guess it depends on what the body is trying to accomplish. I'm sorry, I don't know how helpful that was.
So we're talking in opinions now. My opinion is the board would vote on what we have currently in its unfinished form. I guess what you were saying, you know, could they vote on this and then could CAMPAC still meet? Yes, CAMPAC could still meet and make decisions around application and the other details that need to be figured out. Would the county board vote on something with incomplete information? That's a judgment call. I think yes, they would, because they're ready to have some finality on this, as we all are. Especially if we're transparent about, like, this is a funding formula where we still need to work out how we're calculating social cohesion. That'll come in the next couple of weeks. But isn't this the direction that, you know, we were all heading based on the feedback from the last couple of meetings? My opinion is they would vote to move forward on that. And also the fact that we still need to bring the recommendations from CAMPAC when the grant process is complete back to them in the future anyway, whether that's in September or another month. So it's not like it's their final vote on the matter. That's my opinion. Celia or Kelsey could have a different opinion on it, but I think it is important to take the progress that's available to us and keep moving forward, rather than to try to get something perfect and wait until, you know, that. I just don't know.
I appreciate that. And I also am thinking about what Ms. Benton was saying about wanting to feel like this is less of a gray area. And so I know this isn't a voting item, but I guess where I feel like I'm at, and I really appreciate all the answers and insights and information that we've talked about today. I'm thinking about the email to go out to CAMPAC members after this meeting that we just had. If we could ask the council, everybody to show up at that meeting if they can, whether virtual or in person, emphasizing how much we would appreciate that. I'm thinking about reaching out to some people and just asking how they feel about being available to meet so that we can get more clear on what the criteria is, because my hope would be that we would have a meeting as soon as possible after the meeting of the Parks and Culture Committee in May, so that we can be moving forward and giving Ms. Benton's team more to go with, and having an application that we can all feel, application process and form that we feel good about, so that we can feel that momentum. Does that make sense?
I appreciate that. I will say, I don't think this group needs to wait for the Parks Committee to continue to have this discussion. I am just going to move forward with the plan to co-present with Director Tarantino on what the funding strategy that this board has already approved. We'll continue to support all of you in working out the details. And I would like to just make one quick point of clarification on that for this group, just in the interest of transparency. I just want to be very transparent that so historically, $10,000 of the CAMPAC levy has gone towards the Washington Park Wednesdays. that $10,000 is now, being allocated with our team for the administration of this program, the work that we're doing. And so what was presented was the $307,825. I just updated that to show like these are the actual dollars that would get into the hands of awardees. This is just, I took a little bit of liberties, but again, in the interest of transparency, the only thing I did was I reduced a little bit in the tier 1. So that last time, in the last model, there was like $8,000 left unallocated. Now there's more in tier 1, and there's an $825 balance. And I'm happy to go back to the last one if people want to see comparisons. But I just want to be very transparent that this is the actual amount going into grants this year. So this is what we would put in a report to the board and noting that as well, which the board approved on and is theoretically aware of.
Thank you for that explanation. My understanding is that in years past, when there was an administrator, that he was getting that much or more. It makes sense that we would have to have money for administrative work on this. Does anybody else have any questions on that or questions about anything else we've talked about before we get ready to, I kind think of the word, end the meeting?
I just want to say, Jim, Celia, thank you so much for getting in the weeds on this stuff, because we are volunteers and we don't know the ins and outs, but just appreciating how you are making this like I'm able to understand this and follow along. So thank you so much, and keep up the good work. And I'm trying to make things easier for you. I think that's the whole committee's group role, is to try to make things easier for you. So we want to do this right, and we want to do this well, because not only will we have these art groups angry at us, we also don't want to anger the supervisors, because that affects how much money we can fight for. So let's keep going. And I'm just trying to think about ways to get action items. Is there a way? Never mind.
We could always do it another year, Antoine. It's not like we're here for a couple of years. It's okay.
But we're so close.
Take the little
it's
wins.
like we're 92%. we're 87% there. And so I just see the finish line. So I'm a little antsy. But thank you all for your work. Kelsey and Sandy, thank you for your work too. You guys rock.
Thanks, Antoine.
Well said. So are we ready to wrap up? Anybody have more to say, or okay?
How are we going to facilitate a next meeting?
Who's going to facilitate the next meeting?
Well, how are we going to get a next, what's happening as far as getting a next meeting and when?
My thinking was that the email will go out about what Kelsey was talking about earlier, the parks. I keep wanting to say Parks and Rec, Parks and Culture meeting, and then try to get a meeting of this body together shortly after. So maybe it would make sense to do a doodle poll. But like I said, I also want to reach out to individuals who haven't been able to make it and find out what could help with that. Like I mentioned probably earlier, I did reach out to a couple of people during the meeting and have not heard back. So if I can do some background work as an individual, I will certainly attempt that. But originally I was thinking that we would try to meet again before the parks meeting, but it sounds more realistic to try and meet as soon as we can after, bearing in mind what you were saying about June. And so maybe it would help if I just said that I think we should meet again in May. How do others feel? I see nods from Member Vernon and Member Carter. So that would be my preference, but I realize that means another meeting. But with
If we had a quorum, we wouldn't have to do that. So,
amen.
So it is what it is.
Yeah.
Madam Chairwoman, before you bang the virtual gavel, I just got to read in item 6 real quick. Item 6, e-comments submitted to the Cultural, Artistic, and Musical Programming Advisory Council via the County Legislative Information Center CLIC. I will note I accessed prior to the meeting and nobody had submitted any virtual comments, but if any are submitted during the course of this meeting, I'll be able to view them upon adjournment and append them to your minutes, so they will be publicly available. I will send out that doodle poll, Madam Chair. I'll work with you. We'll pick 2 dates and see if we can get 5 of you for one of the specific dates, probably again over the lunch hour.
I really appreciate that. Thank
Hope
you.
you don't mind watching me eat. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
I did
you.
not even notice. Thank you, everybody.